Today's guest is someone who has been at the forefront of discovering and funding the next generation of breakthrough talent. She's been instrumental in backing young founders who go on to create billion-dollar companies, from Dylan Field at Figma to the team at Loom. As a key figure at the Thiel Fellowship and founder of 1517 Fund, she's made it her mission to find the young and ambitious innovators who are building the future in their garages.
One of the things that we think about a lot is belief capital, and it's about giving young people resources to be able to do the thing they want to do.
Meet the talent scout who wants to fund 11-year-olds and believes that some ideas just can't wait.
You know, he thinks I'm joking, but I'm not really joking.
So I'm very excited today to interview Danielle, one of my favorite people and one of the best talent curators that I know from 1517. Danielle, do you want to say like a few words about yourself before we are starting?
Sure, absolutely. First off, thanks for having me on. It's always fun to talk to good people. Really big, exciting day today, actually, that we're talking to, because today is the day that Figma is IPOing. That's Dylan Field. He was one of our early Thiel fellows. I've known Dylan now at this point for, I think it's like 14 years. And so it's been really interesting to see this whole journey from the beginning days of, thinking, okay, hey, I want to sort of take on Adobe here and build a better design tool, to today, literally watching him ring the opening bell this morning and hugging all his teammates. And really excited to see how it does in the stock market. And then this is, just such a pivotal point for Dylan, and also proving out yet again that one path is not for all. You don't need to have a college degree to do great things. And our phrase that we always used at the Thiel Fellowship and also at 1517 is some ideas just can't wait. So I'm really glad Dylan didn't wait to get started on Figma.
Wow, and it's so amazing how this grant is almost like responsible for $200 billion valuation. It's like, how far can something like that take a person?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we think about a lot is belief capital. And it's about giving young people resources to be able to do the thing they want to do. Because I think a lot of times what happens is that young people are always told to wait. Like, oh, you should wait until later to be able to do the thing you're doing. And at 1517 at the Thiel Foundation, we really said, why not? Like, why not start right now? And at the fellowship, that was a $100,000 grant. Dylan used it to get an apartment in San Francisco, buy some bunk beds for him and Evan. They were really, really scrappy. And to get started on what they were doing, that was non-dilutive capital. And also gave them the permission of, hey, it's okay to be outside of school. Here's a cohort of people who are doing this. Here's a community. At the time when the fellowship started 15 years ago, this idea was incredibly radical. And now the idea of like an American gap year is just pretty normal at this point. So it's been really interesting to watch the culture change big time around this, and how something like, a non-dilutive grant can help get people started. So we actually do this at 1517 as well. And one of our learnings was that you don't necessarily have to give someone $100,000 to get started. You could start them with something like $1,000. So we've had a number of young people who were working on projects who we met when they were teenagers and high schoolers. We would give them $1,000. A good example of this is Ethan at Mock Industries. We gave him $1,000 to start building sort of like a new kind of rifle in his garage. We were like, wow, okay, this guy has this irrationally passionate nature, about defense, and has some ideas that he wants to get started on. Saw him get started with that in high school. And then he took a break from MIT and said, hey, I want to take this further. And we wrote the first $100,000 check into what has now become Mock Industries, which is becoming, a great defense tech company that now people model themselves after. So it's really, it's both like the capital, but it's also people telling you, hey, why not get started? And backing that up with cash is important. There's a lot of accolades that young people get and awards for things, but it's different when someone says, hey, this is money for you to build your future with.
Wow. Generally, like, what is the thing that you are looking for, or a few things that get you, okay, this guy is not a bullshit, like there is something interesting here? Like, what are the things that you are measuring or noticing, and what are the things for Dylan?
Yeah, I mean, for what we're looking for overall for the types of people we work with, like the biggest trait that I think we look for, and there's a bunch of them that we look for, is something we call hyperfluency. And it's this ability to talk backwards and forwards about the space they're in. You can just tell they're super passionate about it. They've been eating, drinking, breathing, sleeping it for years. They have novel ideas. They have a sense for where they want to push the future forward on something. It's not the, hey, I found a business innovation here and I think this could make money. That's not a passionate answer. It usually goes back to, hey, I've used, in the case of Dylan, I've used design software to build all kinds of things. And I think none of it works really well. And I think we could have something that's collaborative and, just figuring out like how he would try to go up against like legacy software services. And it was something he was very, very passionate about. And he was also doing it. He wasn't just talking about it. And so it's this idea of like seeing someone kick the ball forward on the field. So he was already starting to build that ability to get started and actually build your product and not just have the idea is really important. So like it's both that vision, the technical skill to get started, and the ability to also like work with other people. And Dylan has that in spades. I mean, he's such a wonderful person to work with. And this is one of the things that I'm so excited about is like, he's been recognized for a long time now as a tech leader, and getting to watch someone who is both has strong conviction on what he's doing, but he's also like a very kind person. You don't always see that in the tech world. And so I'm really excited for him to just like keep showing people what great leadership can look like. And that started early, on the Figma team and how he hired and how he worked with people. And, and even today in the IPO, he's thanking past team members of Figma for what they did. And you don't see that often these days in leadership. And so to me, it's this really exciting moment of that he will be inspiring and continue to inspire the up and comers who we're working with now, because we work a lot with teenagers and people in their early 20s.
Wow. Do you think there is a difference between how you are picking people to invest? Because you are wearing two hats, right? Like one grants and one, more than that, but these two has like 15, 17 investments, and then like the grant side of that. Like, do you think there is a difference between like what you're measuring, how you're curating?
I would say it's mostly about stage. So with the grants, it's more on the like, wow, okay, often a teenager is super excited about this work that they want to do. I actually prefer when it's not really a startup pitch on that grant side. Like it is not a startup grant, it's a maker grant. So when someone comes and says, hey, I want to start like piecing something together in my garage, especially that has a hardware component or sometimes like a bio component where you can tell like they're going to get their hands dirty on something. That's really what that $1,000 is for, is to build that. On the funding side, it's that same passion, but applied to, hey, I think I've got something I can sell here. Like, I think this could be a business. I think this could be a game changer in the world, bringing new inventions to life, bringing new business models to life, things like that. So I would say it's more about like stage. So a lot of times with the people we're offering grants to, it's that we're thinking in the future, they may become someone who we want to fund with 15, 17. And we also have a large community that we keep as well. Capital is the place that we are most likely constrained, but we'll meet young people and say like, hey, we want you to come to our events. We want you to be involved in the community. And then we also get to watch how they maturate over time. And then sometimes later we'll be like, hey, now's the right time for a grant. Now's the right time for an investment, and go from there. Like we have a young man named Human in San Francisco who started out with a grantee with us. I think we've known him since he was about like 15, maybe 16 years old. We gave him a grant to do some work literally in the garage. We're big on garage science of his parents' house. And he started thinking about novel ways to extract rare earth metals at lower energy costs than what can be done currently. And now he has a warehouse in San Francisco. We gave him $100,000 to start this company called Silcoa. And he's getting great results off the work that he's doing, and is going into like the next stages of a company. So a lot of times it's about like when we act with capital at 15, 17, but overall we're looking for that kind of like obsessive, passionate trait of this person has almost a calling level of what they're doing here. And that calling is usually in a given space. It's not necessarily a calling to be like, I've always known I'm supposed to be an entrepreneur or something like that. It's like an entrepreneur is there to invent or solve problems. And so that is what the person is digging into.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, besides like spotting talent and measuring them, like I think also about talent cultivation, like how to give them the tools. And what do you think some of the biggest problems, like from everyone, I mean, besides money that you supported, so what are the biggest problems the talents facing today, especially like young talents, high schoolers, other things like that?
Yeah, I think the tools are really community. It's like we've all heard the adages of you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I think that's super, super true. And what we've seen over time, and this goes back to the old Thiel Fellowship days, is bringing people to a hyper-saturated, optimistic, positive environment has a profound effect on them. And they don't have to necessarily live in that place, even just visiting. So for example, we have a camp that we run for teens called 2E, where we do a deep tech field trip day in San Francisco. And we kind of show them like, hey, this is the landscape. This is what people do. And it gives them a purview of like, oh, wow, the world can operate in this way. We just had some of our founders visit San Francisco for the first time. And they were like, wow, we can't believe how optimistic everybody is. And we didn't have to explain what we were doing to people. They were just interested, and at home, normally they're kind of battling people about, oh, well, why would you do this? And why not just get a job? And like things like that. And so the biggest tool that I often see is bringing people or connecting them to peers who have that positive attitude, because it has a really profound effect. Like even some of our old Thiel fellows who we didn't think would necessarily like end up going in the startup direction. I can think about Chris Olah, who has been like a real front runner in ML and AI, and he worked at Google Brain and has published his own work and all of this. He's one of the co-founders of Anthropic, and he was a researcher, but he got bit by that startup bug. Like it was like, okay, cool. Like, and he was in this environment that says like, hey, why not try to build, something with your research and turn this into a company and not just have it be inside the walls of Google or inside of a academic institution. And so to me, that's the biggest tool that you can give to anybody is like that environment. Whether it's like a visit to a place or connections with peers who think the same way. I think like loneliness and the hardship of trying to work in like a negative environment is very, very difficult. So I think that's like the biggest tool. And then, we can talk about, resources in terms of mentorship and connecting people to the right person who's done something before. Like Vinay at Loom actually mentors some of our CTOs at 1517. We were the first check into Loom. They were acquired by Atlassian for just shy of $1 billion. And he's very generous with his time because he knows how hard it was to get started. And so, I have an update call with one of our CTOs today who's being mentored by Vinay, and he's just over the moon about being able to get that kind of direct access and mentorship from someone who's not only done it before, but done it successfully.
Yeah, energy is so powerful. Like every time, like my mood is completely like different. Like if I'm exposed to people with low or high energy, it's so different. It's crazy.
Sometimes, we feel it too. We feel it too. Yeah. No, I know we're very, very lucky in that, like, I tell people that we get to drink from the fountain of youth every day and give people resources to make their dreams come true. I've been thinking about printing out, like, I haven't carried business cards for a long time, but I've been thinking about carrying a new business card that says 1517 professional fairy godmother on it. Like, it's like, that's my life. And I'm very lucky, a friend is an ER doctor. And so she sees the hardest of the hard. And yeah, I mean, it's super inspiring to do this work and work with these people and bring them together. And the phrase that, and this has been true for 15 years from the fellowship all the way through now, young people say, wow, like when they come to our events, I don't get to meet other young people like me. Like they're just facing so much skepticism and so much, oh, hey, sit down and wait, that when they come into our environment, they're like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even know that I needed this jolt of like, yes, go do the thing, try it out, and actually a peer group to do it with.
Amazing. I mean, you mentioned something that I want to touch on, like the guy from Anthropic who used to be a researcher, and I'm noticing that sometimes there is someone that is very deep into a space, could be someone that is doing archaeology, like a Zen monk or something like that. So sometimes the archetypes are different, and people that are coming from a closed world and then like is applying that knowledge in a new space can be very explosive. Like, did you saw more examples like that where when someone is not like a typical entrepreneurial and there is a new archetype, like what are the types of archetypes that you see like newly emerging of people that are not like the typical?
I mean, I actually think about Josie from the Embryo Corporation. So Josie has done a lot in biology, and is kind of known as like a renegade biologist. But actually, like I had the chance to do a really nice long sit-down conversation with Josie at the Frontier Tower in San Francisco. And I mean, we had like over 100 people at this event just who were really wanting to hear more of Josie's story. And I really think like, a lot of times I was talking with Josie right beforehand, like a few weeks beforehand, I was visiting at the lab and I was asking questions. And one of the questions was something like, sort of like, why biology? And Josie said, people sort of ask me that, but it's kind of the wrong question. Like that's not really how I conceive of myself. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to put that in my hat before I talk to Josie. And I was doing a bunch of background reading and things like that about Josie's past. And I think really like Josie is an artist and a provocateur. And it just happens that one of Josie's mediums happens to be biology.
Their expression, exactly.
Exactly.
Biology is explained, but not who she is.
Right.
Tool.
Right, exactly. And so it was really interesting to do this interview talking about sort of like creation and generative acts, and where that came from and how that filters into what Josie is doing with the Embryo Corporation, which is a company that is genetically modifying animal embryos in a way also to sort of show and offer permission for like one of Josie's big goals is to make an actual unicorn. Be like, all right, let's, especially in the world of VC, like it would be rather funny to be like, all right, we made an actual unicorn, let's go. Josie's team will be starting in some other areas first that I can't disclose right now. But I think that like creative mindset is just being applied to biology. And so we see this a lot with the people that we work with, where they're really deep somewhere. And it's like the places I get most interested in with founders is when they're at the intersection of something. So they're like, hey, I'm an artist and a biologist. And it's like, okay, cool. How does that work? Like, let's dig into that. And we've seen that a lot with founders that we work with. And in fact, actually, in our founder chat that we had, a founder put up this piece of art that he made. And he's a physicist. And he was like, hey, I'm trying to make a little extra income. I'm selling a little bit of my art right now, and sent us all a link to it. And then other founders in the chat started posting the art that they had made. And I had one of our founders is in the energy space, and he posted this painting that he did. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And so in some ways it really shouldn't surprise me that like the arts and this kind of builder mindset that we go for at 1517 go together. But it was really cool to see it in real time of like, oh yeah, that's right. These people are wily, not just in their companies, but also in their artistry, in their home lives, and all these other places.
Very interesting. Sadly, I missed the conference that you did for curators, but not many people are speaking about curators as a kind of audience or community of its own or a category. But from this conference, like what is the unique approaches or different approaches for talent curation that you saw? Like how do you see the map of talent curators as a category?
Yeah. So, a little over 2 years ago, I started an event called Renaissance Reimagined. And it's basically the event I always wanted to happen when I was running the fellowship. But when I was running the Thiel Fellowship, there weren't other fellowships for young makers. Like maybe there were fellowships for postdocs, things like that, but it was very rare. And so I always at my heart, I'm a community builder. So I love bringing people together to cross-pollinate and share information. And so we started this event 2 years ago. We just had it a few weeks ago now at this point here in San Francisco, the second time, and we had people there from all kinds of fellowships. from actually across the world, which is great. And I think one of the main things that kind of comes across is that each program is being a beacon. We're all putting out this information and this light around, hey, if you're working if you're working on these types of projects, we want to hear from you, and we're going to be a supportive environment to do that. And I think, a lot of us are doing talent curation in terms of meeting lots of people, doing boots on the ground, work, putting content out there, all this. But at the end of the day, the big goal is to be this beacon. Like for 1517, the beacon is like, if you're young and weird, we want to talk to you. And like, we're a positive place to have you come interact with us. And we're an accessible place. Like, you don't need a warm intro. You don't need to have already had a company, or something like that to get in the door. In fact, the weirder and wilier, the better at 1517.
I saw on your Twitter, like, just send me a cold email. You don't need an intro. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean, because seriously, like, if what I'm looking for are the up and coming 17-year-olds who are building wily shit in their garages, are they going to
don't have anyone? Yeah, they usually don't know anyone.
Yeah, they don't know anyone. And I often tell founders, especially at the ages that we work, like, hey, your parents are your first investors. I just want to be the second, whether that's through our grant or our investments. But I think all of these programs, like, it's really about being this beacon and putting ourselves out into the world. Like, one of the programs that came is a group called Blackbird, and they work a lot in Australia with young people who are building. And, they're being this place of like, hey, you can come to us and talk to us, and we'll help you to, facilitate what you want to do in the future. And like O'Shaughnessy Ventures is the same way. And they're doing it in tech, in the arts, in film. So it's really about getting these messages out there about, and like on the even higher level of all these groups, I think, and this is why I call the event Renaissance Reimagined. It's like, I think things like talent curation are where we start getting like really novel worlds, not just technologically, but like in the arts, in music, in film. And these are places to do it. And people are starting to catch on, like, looking at things like the Thiel Fellowship and go, oh, wow, that program has been wildly successful. And like, now we want to do it as well. And so, one of the things that I often get calls about is like, hey, we have this high net worth individual who wants to start a program that kind of emulates a similar thing. And like, one of the biggest things I tell them is like, one, you have to be clear about who you serve. And then you have to be a beacon for that, because you have to be, your light is to shine bright enough that those people can find you and that you can find them.
Yeah. And what are some of the approaches that you like the most? Does anyone about either geography or a segment or a medium, or did you saw something that is about a specific approach or specific like?
I mean, I think a lot of the approach is just being accessible and meeting people for all of these different programs, not being a gated community where you have to somehow like make it to get into it. My fear has always been that if anything we did became like a gated community, then like we're going to miss out on the diamonds in the rough. Like, and I've also seen so much change over time. I mean, we work with such young people that do I expect a 14 or 15-year-old to be like super polished? And no, of course not. But do I see that spark of like, wow, this person has really high ambition and they're 14 years old, and sure, they need a little polish in some of these areas. Cool. Like, we still want them to be part of our group. So one of the things I see overall is a lot of community building in these groups, because that's a way to attract talent. And it's also a way to get to know that talent. So then you'll know, okay, these are the people that I want to offer something like a grant or an investment to. So I think that's a really big piece of it. And overall too, I would say that a lot of these programs are doing their own scouting. Like, they're not just going to the typical schools and saying, okay, we just go to the Ivies and then we're done looking for people. They're going to different geographies. There's a lot going on in Bangalore right now. There's a lot going on in places that people don't look. And a lot of these programs are spending time in those places doing community building to like unlock those people who might not get noticed otherwise.
That's very cool. Also, Tyler Cohen is very bullish on India. Also, from being an Israeli, that whenever you have a country that, I mean, it's not the case in India, but it is the case in Israel, that you have a constant threat, like the life is not very convenient, and the vibe is much more lively. Like you have people that have more urgency, more. So I think it's like the case in India as well. Like the hustler mentality makes people much more.
Yeah, I think that matters. I mean, it's interesting. Like I've gone to this funny ecosystem, but Nova Scotia, a handful of times in Canada, and people are like, "Why are you going to Nova Scotia?" I'm like, hey, listen, like there's some really interesting talent there, and I think part of it, to your point, is that even thinking about multi-generational upbringing, many of those people are like, oh yeah, my grandfather was a miner and did this incredibly difficult work. And now they're like, okay, cool. Like we're working in hard tech and deep tech and all these things. And we're not afraid of hard work. Like it's embedded in the family culture. It's embedded in the place. And I found that always to be really, really interesting to look at, of like, how does the geography shape who's coming out of it and the types of stories they tell? So it doesn't surprise me that matters as much as it does. And also the family piece too. So many of the founders that we work with, I like to ask them questions like, yeah, tell me about your childhood. Like, tell me about your upbringing. Like, and so many of them are like, oh yeah, like this industry goes back sort of multiple parent layers, in their personal upbringing. So it's like they were steeped in something even before they like decided to work on it. It's like, I don't even know if they had a choice.
Are you also checking for traumas, or you're not
the whole trauma narrative, I think it just sounds like this weird, sexy thing. Like, oh, trauma, blah, blah, blah. Like, I just think that's BS.
Anything can be a trauma. Like you can frame anything as trauma. My dad didn't pay attention to me, but
yeah. And there's, as someone who studied psychology, there's capital T trauma and there's little t trauma. And I think that going through adversity definitely matters, but I'm not here to like make someone cry in a meeting and regale me with like that they were beaten as a child. Like that's not what I'm looking for.
It's like this guy that you wrote about on Twitter that came with his dog. They said he's probably not a good fit for investment, but the dog is cute.
Right. No, yeah, exactly. And honestly, like some of the best founders I've worked with do not come from traumatic families. They come from really great families who supported them in what they're doing. So do we look for like, hey, like, if it comes up and someone's like, hey, like, we have a founder we work with right now who actually escaped a very oppressive regime. And I was like, holy moly, that is obviously really, really impressive. And it gives you that sort of sense in yourself of like, okay, if I can escape something like that, I can do anything, which is huge. But that's like not the only indicator.
Yeah, cool. I mean, in regards to what to work on, is there any like in 1517, like current vision of things that you're particularly bullish on, like in terms of where the world is going and social issues and other things that you want to find more things in those topics, or you're just hyper focused on talents and dedication?
Yeah, we are hyper focused on talent. I mean, one of our newer LPs was asking me the other day, and just for the audience, an LP is someone who invests in your fund. He said, what's your goal in 15 years? And I said, I want to be funding 11-year-olds. And, he thinks I'm joking, but I'm not really joking. One of our adages is that child labor is good. Like young people are getting to the frontiers of knowledge way faster than ever. And that timeline of culture of people catching up to that takes too long. And so I want to keep backing talent who is young and wild and has really incredible visions for what things could look like. Like I love a unique pitch. I love something where someone comes to me like Human and says, hey, I want to work on extraction of rare earth metals. And I'm like, whoa, I do not hear that very often. What I hear all the time is I'm building for AI for accounting. Not interesting to me. But someone who's working on something really novel, like this goes back to the Thiel Fellowship days. We weren't saying, hey, we think the world will look like this and you're going to fit into that. We said, what do you think the world is going to look like? And we want to support you on your vision for that. And we do the same thing with 1517 now in terms of we want to work with the founders who are going to bring us to the frontier of knowledge in a certain space, and often we want to make a bet on that before anybody else does. When we invested in Lambda Labs, they were originally a photo sharing app. And we knew, Stephen and Michael, the two brothers, for years and years before that. And we thought, man, we are terrible at consumer investing, but we know these two people are super sharp and have really high ambition. And so we ended up writing one of the first checks into the company. Now they pivoted a couple of times. At first they were building, and they still build their deep learning workstations, which they had to build to make their old photo sharing app. This is how they sort of came up with it.
Like the application has to build the infrastructure for the application.
Exactly. And so I look for that a lot. Like when people are pitching, I'm looking at the infrastructure layer of like, hey, you think you're building this thing? I want to hear about the thing underneath that you're building. And so it's been really incredible to see like, okay, they've just like stuck with it. I think technically they've had the C Corp for 12 years. And yeah, I mean, I think we're going to hear some really big news from them in 2026. But yeah, it's just about like being part of that journey really early. And like Stephen would talk to us about like, hey, I think the future is like GPUs. Like this is going to be the new energy. Like this is going to be the resource everybody needs. And we were like, cool, sounds awesome. Like keep building in that area. Like we want to see you pull this vision into the fullness of what it could be. But we're not here to tell anybody, hey, we think you need to be working in this particular area.
Yeah, because the unknown are much bigger than the known. Like how do you think you can, like what is missing for you to get more 11-year-olds? Like what is the thing that needs to happen for more 11-year-olds to come to you, you think?
Gosh, I mean, I am mentoring some 11-year-olds right now. So I do have a handful. I mean, I think some of this goes back into things like ed tech and like the education system. A lot of the younger people I work with are people who are doing some form of independent study or homeschooling because they actually have the time and the permission to be geeking out as hard as they want in the areas that they want to be doing. And I think we're going to see more of this over time. I think it's becoming very clear to parents that
like Socratica, but for schools, that every Sunday part-time
exactly. It's like, children similarly, I think, want to be in a saturated environment, kind of like what we talked about earlier. They want to be with other peers, building and making things. I was just visiting Alpha School, where they do all their test prep through like AI models, but then the students can work on projects, for the rest of the day. They can go off campus. I was like, wow, that's amazing. Like that's very different. And I think we're going to see more and more models like that, which is going to mean that I'm going to hear from more 11-year-olds in the future.
It's amazing. I would love to support that if I can in any way. Another thing is social topics and institutions. So companies are one form of like coordination. The people work to solve problems, but I feel like a lot of things doesn't have the right mechanisms or capital mechanisms. So things like what Balaji is trying to do with the network state, things like what Strachman did with the INBI. So topics that are social, but they are not non-profit. Like, are you seeing these kind of things? Like, how do you think about like innovation in the capital formation side of things and new ways of doing things that are beyond like a company structure?
Sure. I mean, there's a few things that come to mind, and some of this actually goes like way back, even in my personal history of things like the Seasteading Institute. So, Seasteading has been around now for, gosh, how long? Let me think about this for a second. Probably almost 20 years. Yeah, which is wild. And I knew Patri when I was in my early 20s, and we used to laugh and joke and be like, oh, Patri wants these floating styrofoam islands. But I think the thing that, in the Seasteading Institute is doing really great and putting out some different new initiatives. But like the platform outside of the Seasteads that they have like really caused and been a catalyst for is this whole like, hey, you could have charter cities, you could have charter governments. And I think a lot of young people today are very interested in thinking about the systemic layer of everything they're involved in, whether it's a startup, school, governance, like all of this. And so seeing things like, Edge City and things like that popping up and actually getting real traction. I mean, people have talked about these ideas for a long time, and it's really cool to see people actually participating in them. And it's not just like an idea anymore. It's like, okay, people are actually building for this landscape. And I think things like that also are going to have a profound effect on how people think about building and creating, because you're not locked as much to like the place you grew up or something like that. You can be like, oh, hey, I'm going to go spend a month at Edge City and work alongside people who are also the types who would uproot themselves for a month to be somewhere. So I think systems like that are really, really interesting. And yeah, I haven't made it out to Singapore yet for like the network state stuff, but at some point got to make it over there.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, that was very fun. And I'll be next week in San Francisco. I'm happy to grab a coffee. Anything you want to ask me?
Oh, gosh. What got you interested in talent curation? Like, why did that become something that you've become passionate about?
I was thinking all my life about the source of value of things, like what makes things valuable. And I think like the source of value of everything is the person, but I feel like talent spotting is not like a science. Okay, so one thing in sports that baseball cards of people that are moving between one team to another and the player worth like $100 million. So there is a value to the talent. It's an asset class. So I came from the finance angle and thought about talent as an asset class. Talent is not an asset class, yes, but it is an asset class in sports. And it is an asset class starting to be in AI researchers that people are like Facebook is paying $100 million for this guy. Why? Why $100 million? Why $1 billion? So I'm thinking like how talent spotting can be a science, because this what is a source of value. And trying to think if that can be more quantified. Or so far no success. It's very qualitative area, but it's very interesting to learn more about the source of value, like where the value is derived from, and how to know more about the talent spotting as a science or as a way to measure. So
Interesting.
Danielle, thank you so much. And
yeah, thanks so much for having me, Yoni.
yeah, hope to see you soon.
Yeah.